Hey guys, tonight we begin with something strangely comforting. Not comfort itself, of course, quite the opposite. We are talking about cold floors, damp straw, drafty stone rooms, dirt under your blanket, and the long glorious history of people trying to sleep while absolutely miserable. So dim the lights, loosen your shoulders, and let the modern mattress appreciate itself quietly in the corner. You have memory foam, you have pillows with opinions, you have blankets that do not smell like livestock. That already places you far above most of humanity for most of history. Tonight, we drift backward into a world where sleep was less of a luxury ritual and more of a negotiation with weather, insects, smoke, and hard surfaces. Kings dealt with it. Peasants dealt with it. Monks actively chose it, because apparently discomfort was fashionable in some circles. Take a slow breath, settle in, and let us wander into the ancient night. For much of early human history, there was no bedroom in the modern sense. There was shelter if you were lucky. There was wine if you were not. A person might sleep in a cave, under an animal hide, beside a fire that smoked directly into the face, or on ground recently occupied by bugs who had no intention of moving out. The earth itself was the mattress, sometimes softened by leaves, sometimes by reeds, sometimes by nothing at all. Imagine the confidence required to lie down on raw dirt and say, "Yes, this will do." In prehistoric camps, warmth mattered more than softness. If the ground was hard, that was unfortunate. If the temperature dropped, that was dangerous, so people clustered close together. Families, children, elders, dogs, maybe a goat wandering through with no respect for boundaries. Privacy was not part of the package. If someone snored, everyone knew. If someone rolled over dramatically, the whole shelter probably shifted. If someone woke up and stepped on you in the dark, that was just community living. And then came early villages, mud brick houses, timber huts, stone dwellings. Better than open sky, certainly. But let us not romanticize too quickly. Floors were often packed earth, which sounds rustic until you realize packed earth is still earth. People spread mats, straw, wool cloaks, or rough textiles over the floor. This helped slightly. It also collected dust magnificently. In colder climates, dampness crept upward from the ground. In warmer climates, insects approached from below with entrepreneurial spirit. Ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and other early civilizations did develop raised beds for wealthier people. This was an excellent innovation. Getting off the floor reduced pests and moisture. It also allowed one to feel superior, which humans have always valued. But raised beds were expensive. Wood cost money, craftsmanship cost money. Decorative frames cost even more, so the rich slept above ground, while the poor remained loyal to dirt, a pattern that would continue for ages. In ancient Egypt, elite beds could be elegant things, curved frames with woven surfaces. Some even had headrests made of wood or stone, yes, stone headrests. Because apparently neck comfort was considered suspicious, still, compared with the common laborer sleeping on reed mats, this was paradise. Now let us glide over to ancient Greece, where philosophers discussed virtue, reason, and the cosmos, while many ordinary people still slept on simple pallets. A pallet, for those unfamiliar, is a polite historical term meaning temporary bundle of bedding that collapses emotionally by morning. Greek homes could be modest. Bedding was rolled out at night and stored by day. Rooms were multi-purpose. The place where you ate, talked, repaired sandals, and argued politics might also become your sleeping area after sunset, which honestly is efficient. Then Rome arrives, grand and confident. Rome loved engineering, baths, roads, bureaucracy, and telling everyone else how civilized they were. Naturally, some Romans enjoyed proper beds with frames, mattresses stuffed with reeds, feathers, or wool, and private sleeping chambers, but not everyone was reclining in luxury. Urban apartment dwellers in Rome often lived in cramped upper-floor units. These insulae could be crowded, noisy, smoky, and structurally adventurous. Sleeping there meant hearing neighbors, street traffic, animals, shouting merchants, and possibly a suspicious cracking beam overhead. Nothing says restful sleep like wondering whether the ceiling respects gravity. The poor used mats or crude bedding. Servants might sleep near kitchens, hallways, or storerooms. Slaves often slept where they were told to, which tended not to prioritize spinal alignment. Meanwhile, soldiers on campaign slept outdoors, in tents, on cloaks, or directly on the ground. Rome conquered much of the known world, but it still could not invent camping comforts. Let us now stroll into the medieval period, where castles look romantic in paintings and absolutely freezing in reality. Stone castles were symbols of power. They were also giant refrigerators. Stone walls held strength, but not warmth. Floors were cold, windows were narrow. Drafts moved through corridors like they paid rent. Fires helped, but heating a massive hall was difficult. Smoke had a habit of lingering. Chimneys existed, but efficiency was still in development, just like everyone's patience. A lord might have a bed with curtains, blankets, and furs. Curtains were not merely decorative. They trapped warmth and gave privacy in halls, where many people slept nearby. Yes, even nobles often shared sleeping spaces with attendants, guards, children, or assorted household figures, whose exact purpose no one fully explained. The grand four-poster bed was partly status symbol, partly anti-freezing device. Below them, servants slept on pallets, benches, rushes, or floor space. Rushes were layers of reeds or grasses spread across floors. Fresh rushes could be pleasant enough. Old rushes became a storage archive of crumbs, dirt, grease, and whatever else had fallen there over months. A sort of medieval carpet with memories. Peasant cottages were smaller, but sometimes easier to heat than castles. One-room homes housed families and animals together, because livestock produced warmth and had practical value. If your cow helps heat the room, the cow is now a roommate. People slept in communal arrangements, parents, children, grandparents, perhaps a chicken with boundary issues. Beds, when present, were treasured possessions. Straw mattresses needed regular replacing. Fleas considered this an invitation rather than a deterrent, and yet, despite everything, people slept. Humans are adaptable like that. Now we drift into monasteries, where some individuals deliberately chose hard sleeping conditions as spiritual discipline. Monks in many traditions embrace simplicity. Sometimes that meant wooden boards, thin mats, or coarse blankets. Sleep could be limited, interrupted by night prayers, and stripped of comfort to encourage humility. Because if there is one thing humans love, it is making rest into a moral challenge. Some saints were praised for sleeping on stone floors, using rocks as pillows, or reducing sleep altogether. Modern sleep experts would have concerns. Medieval chroniclers called it devotion. Nuns too often lived with strict sleeping rules. Shared dormitories, plain bedding, cold chambers, early waking bells. The snooze button had not yet been invented. Two civilizations' sorrow. Across the Islamic world, medieval households often used carpets, cushions, and layered textiles that could be more comfortable than Northern European floor sleeping. Bedding might be laid out at night and stored during the day. This flexibility made sense in warm climates and urban homes where space mattered. Still, comfort varied by wealth, region, and season. Winter remained undefeated. In East Asia, sleeping traditions developed differently again. In China, Kong-heated platforms in northern regions offered a brilliant solution. A masonry bed stove warmed by flues from a fire below. Finally, a civilization looked at cold floors and said, "Absolutely not." Korea developed underfloor heating systems, warming floors from beneath, a masterpiece of practical genius. Meanwhile, much of Europe was still climbing into damp beds in drafty rooms and pretending this was fine. Japan often used futon bedding laid on tatami mats, rolled out nightly and stored daily. Clean, efficient, elegant, and refreshingly sensible. History is full of moments where one society solves a problem while another continues suffering decoratively. Back in Europe, the early modern era slowly improved sleeping arrangements for some. Mattresses became more common among middling households. Feather beds were prized. Sheets became status markers because laundering linen required labor. Curtains, bedsteads, and private chambers expanded among the wealthy. But let us be clear, many people still slept rough. Travelers in inns shared beds with strangers. Sometimes several strangers, sometimes strangers with fleas. Sometimes strangers who snored like collapsing barns. Bed sharing with unrelated adults was common because beds were expensive and impractical. Personal space was a future concept waiting patiently offstage. Servants slept near employers, apprentices slept in workshops. Sailors slept in hammocks or cramped bunks. Soldiers slept wherever war inconveniently placed them. And through all these centuries, one truth remained constant. The floor was always nearby. If guests arrived unexpectedly, someone moved to the floor. If housing was crowded, someone used the floor. If money was scarce, the floor became permanent management. Even royal households were not immune to discomforts. Palaces were grand, but not always warm, clean, or quiet. Court life involved ceremony, gossip, perfumes attempting heroism, and endless movement of staff. A nobleman might own embroidered bedding and still wake, because a servant entered with candles at dawn. Luxury has limits, so as we settle into tonight's calm little journey, remember that sleep used to be less curated. No lavender spray, no weighted blanket, no mattress comparison videos. Just straw, wool, wood, smoke, weather, and determination. Somewhere in the dark, a medieval farmer turned over on a lumpy sack and sighed. Somewhere else, a prince complained that his imported featherbed felt uneven. Humanity contains many layers. In the next stretch of our wandering, we'll move deeper into the age of bedbugs, royal bedrooms, bizarre sleeping customs, and the strange moment when privacy finally entered the room. But for now, breathe slowly. Feel your soft bed beneath you. Hey guys, tonight we begin in the mud. not metaphorically, actual mud, thick village mud, car truck mud. She can walk through it mud, the kind of mud that enters your shoe, your doorway, your emotional state, and simply stays there. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let your modern plumbing know how much you appreciate it. Tonight we are drifting into the daily life of peasants, the ordinary people who fed kingdoms, built roads, paid rents, survived winters, and somehow kept going, while nobles held banquets and discussed falconry. As always, we move slowly, no battles, no dramatic trumpet music, just a long, steady rhythm of common life, the sound of grinding grain, creaking wood, coughing smoke, and someone somewhere asking where the goat went. Take a breath. Let us wander into the village. The first thing to understand is that most people in history were peasants of some kind. Farmers, labourers, herders, cottagers, field hands, villagers. They were not the side characters of history. They were the main population. Kings were rare, peasants were everywhere. And yet, history books often spend 6 pages on a duke with gout, and 2 lines on the people who harvested his dinner. So tonight, we correct that slightly. A peasant village in medieval Europe was usually small. A cluster of timber houses, perhaps a church, maybe a mill if fortune smiled, and roads that looked more like suggestions. Homes were built with local materials. Wood where forests stood, stone where stone existed. Mud and wattle where budget realities prevailed. Wattle and daub, for the curious, meant woven sticks coated in mud, clay, straw, and hope. Roofs were often thatched. Beautiful in paintings, flammable in life. Inside the house, things were simple. 1 room in many cases. Fire in the center or hearth to one side. Smoke rising upward with varying commitment. If there was no chimney, it simply drifted around the room first, getting to know everyone. Eyes watered, walls darkened, lungs filed complaints. Furniture was limited. A table, stools, benches, storage chests. Beds if the family was doing relatively well. Otherwise pallets, straw sacks, or shared sleeping platforms. Privacy was almost unknown. If you wanted alone time, you probably went outside and hoped nobody followed to discuss onions. The day began early, very early, before sunrise in many seasons. Roosters announced themselves with confidence far exceeding their usefulness. Animals needed feeding. Fires needed reviving. Dough needed mixing. Water needed carrying. Someone always needed carrying. Breakfast was modest. Bread if available. Porridge often. Ale sometimes, even in the morning, because water sources could be unreliable and weak ale was safer. Imagine beginning your day with oatmeal and low-grade beer because sanitation had forced your hand. Honestly, not the worst system. Then came work, and by work, we mean endless work. Fields had to be ploughed, sown, weeded, harvested, repaired, fenced, drained, watched, and worried over. Seasons ruled everything. Spring was urgent, summer was long labor. Autumn was frantic harvest energy. Winter was cold maintenance and anxious counting of supplies. There was no concept of taking a personal day, because vibes are off. If rain ruined crops, everyone noticed. If frost came early, everyone noticed. If animals got sick, everyone noticed loudly. Many peasants did not own the land they worked. They rented strips or held customary rights under a lord. That meant dues, labor obligations, rents in produce, fees for using the mill, fees for baking ovens in some places, fees for inheritance, fees for existing to near someone richer. Feudal systems had many local variations, but one consistent feature was this: somebody above you expected something. A peasant might owe several days of labor each week on the lord's domain land. So after tending his own plot, he went to tend someone else's larger plot. Because exhaustion apparently scales upward, women worked just as constantly, though records often understate it in the traditional historical manner of forgetting half the population. They cooked, baked, brewed, spun wool, mended clothing, cared for children, kept gardens, gathered fuel, milked animals, processed food, cleaned tools, helped in fields, carried water, managed stores, unlikely prevented the village from collapsing entirely. Children also worked, not in a dramatic Victorian chimney sense for this period, but in the practical village sense of doing whatever hands could manage. Watching geese, gathering sticks, scaring birds from crops, carrying things smaller than themselves. Childhood existed, but leisure was limited. Now let us float gently into food. Peasant diets were repetitive. Bread was central in many regions. Dark rye bread, barley bread, oat bread, coarse loaves with texture that could challenge the jaw. Pottage was another staple, a thick stew of grains and vegetables simmered in a pot. Add cabbage, onions, beans, leeks, herbs, maybe peas. If meat entered the pot, it was a festive day or a suspicious coincidence. Chickens provided eggs. Pigs were valuable if a family had one. Dairy varied by region. Cheese was useful because milk does not store itself. Spices were rare luxuries. Salt mattered greatly. Hunger hovered always in the background. A modern person might ask, did they at least have dessert? Friend, they had survival. Still, feast days existed. Religious calendars brought breaks from monotony. Weddings, saints' days, harvest celebrations, fairs. There could be music, dancing, extra food, drinking, wrestling, storytelling, and village gossip reaching championship levels. Humans make joy wherever possible, even in mud. Clothing was practical: wool, linen, rough fabrics. Tunics, gowns, aprons, cloaks, hose, colors existed, but bright dyes cost money. Many wore browns, greys, off-whites, and the timeless shade known as worked outdoors. Shoes were precious and repaired often. Some went barefoot seasonally. Imagine crossing rough ground daily and still finding energy to argue with neighbors. Bathing happened, though not always as later myths suggest. People were not delighted by filth. They washed when possible using basins, rivers, bathhouses were available, or heated water at home. But constant hot bathing in a private room with scented products was not exactly standard village life. Laundry was hard labor, water hauling, scrubbing, wringing, drying. Clean clothing required effort, not a convenient machine humming in the corner like a domestic angel. Now let us talk about noise. Villages were not silent little postcard scenes. Animals made noise, tools made noise, babies made noise. People argued, dogs barked, smithies hammered, bells rang, carts rattled, geese, for reasons known only to geese, objected to everything. At night it grew quieter, but darkness brought its own atmosphere. Whined through cracks, snoring families, rustling livestock, someone coughing, a baby crying, a drunk returning late with optimism and poor balance. Medicine was limited. Herbal remedies existed. Midwives knew practical skills. Folk knowledge mattered. Monasteries preserved some learning, but injury, infection, childbirth complications, and disease remained constant threats. Toothache alone must have driven many philosophical reflections. Life expectancy statistics can mislead because infant mortality was high. Those who survived childhood might live into later adulthood, but life was physically demanding. Bodies aged through labor. Backs bent, hands thickened, joints protested. And yet peasants were not simply miserable caricatures trudging through endless grayness. They loved, joked, flirted, celebrated, sang, played games, told stories, teased one another, fell out with neighbors, made up again, and watched seasons turn. Records mention village sports, dancing circles, archery practice, board games, dice, music on pipes or fiddles, seasonal rituals, prank traditions, and tavern life. Yes, taverns, where people gathered to drink ale, exchange news, complain about taxes, and hear that one man tell the same story again. Every century has that man. Religion shaped daily life deeply. Church bells marked time. Festivals structured the year. Baptisms, marriages, funerals, fasts, feasts, processions. Belief was woven into routine, comfort, fear, identity, and community. A village church might be humble, but it was often the most important shared building. Also one of the few places where everyone gathered while wearing their best available fabric. Let us gently glance at justice. Local disputes happened constantly. Boundaries, animals trespassing, unpaid debts, insults, marriage promises, stolen wood, broken tools. Manor courts or village assemblies handled many issues. Punishments could include fines, public shame, or obligations. Nothing says community harmony like being officially reprimanded over a pig. Taxes increased pressures. Lords wanted dues. Kings wanted taxes. Armies wanted supplies. Clergy wanted tithes. If you were a peasant with 3 sacks of grain, several people already had plans for them. Then came bad years, harvest failure, floods, war passing through, disease among animals, price rises, harsh winters. These could tip households from poor stability into crises quickly, and yet people endured with networks of kin, neighbors, commons rights, seasonal labor, and sheer stubbornness. That may be the most common historical force of all. So when we imagine peasants, we should not picture faceless misery moving through fog. We should picture skilled survivors. People who knew weather science, soil moods, animal behavior, seed timing, brewing methods, weaving tricks, hedge plants, gossip histories, and exactly who borrowed a rake in 1327 and never returned it. Memory was long in villages. As the fire burns low tonight, think of them ending the day. Hands sore, clothes smoky, feet tired, supper eaten. Animals checked, door barred, children asleep in a pile of blankets and elbows. Tomorrow would be the same, and not the same. Rain might come, a calf might be born. The millstone might break, a wedding might be announced. A tax collector might appear, instantly lowering morale. Life moved in circles more than straight lines, and in those circles, generation after generation lived most of human history. In the next part, we'll drift deeper into peasant homes, marriages, village drama, and the surprisingly competitive world of bread baking. But for now, rest easy. You are indoors. Your floor is level. Hey guys, tonight we begin with two subjects that quietly controlled most of human history: food and being slightly dirty. Not glamorous topics, I know. No crowns, no epic speeches, no dramatic cavalry arriving over a hill. Just bread that might be stale, soup that might be thin, and the suspicious smell in the corner of the room that nobody has time to investigate. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and appreciate whatever snack and soap currently exist in your life. Tonight we drift backward into the long age of hunger, smoke, muddy hands, questionable water, and people doing their best with one bucket and very limited options. As always, we move slowly. No panic, no gore, just the gentle truth that for most people in history, staying fed and staying reasonably clean were full-time projects. Take a breath. Let us wander into the kitchen. The average historical kitchen was not a sleek room of polished counters and mood lighting. It was heat, soot, ash, labor, and a pot that had seen things. In many homes, especially medieval and early modern ones, the hearth was the center of life. Food cooked there, warmth came from there, smoke also came from there, enthusiastically. If the chimney worked well, excellent. If not, everyone inhaled dinner before eating it. Walls blackened over time, ceiling beams darkened. Clothes absorbed the scent of smoke until the household itself smelled lightly roasted, which was normal. Cooking required fuel. Wood had to be gathered, chopped, stored, protected from dampness, and rationed. In some regions peat or dung served as fuel. If you are cooking over dried animal dung, life has introduced a certain rustic realism. Meals depended on class, region, and season. For peasants, the diet was repetitive: bread, porridge, pottage, cabbage, onions, beans, oats, barley, maybe cheese, maybe eggs, maybe some bacon if fortune smiled, and a pig had made poor career choices. Pottage deserves respect. It was the survival stew of centuries. A pot simmering with whatever was available: grain, greens, herbs, bits of vegetables. Yesterday's leftovers, tomorrow's expectations. The pot might stay on the fire 4 days, replenished as ingredients appeared, which is efficient, though perhaps not ideal under modern food safety guidelines. The rich ate more variety: meat, fish, pastries, fine bread, imported spices, sweets, wines, fruits out of season, if enough servants suffered to obtain them. But wealth did not automatically guarantee sensible nutrition. Many elites overate, underexercised, and believed odd medical theories. A nobleman could dine magnificently and still be undone by gout, constipation, or a physician recommending powdered pearls. History is full of expensive mistakes. Now let us glide toward bread. Bread was central to life in many societies. Entire economies leaned emotionally against it. A failed grain harvest meant anxiety everywhere, but bread quality varied wildly. The wealthy enjoyed white bread made from finely sifted wheat flour. Soft, pale, prestigious, because of course food also needed social hierarchy. Poorer people often ate darker loaves made from rye, barley, oats, or mixed grains. Sometimes coarse, sometimes dense enough to be used as building material. In desperate years, flour might be stretched with peas, chestnuts, acorns, all things one would normally not invite into bread. There were also risks. Grain stored badly could mold. Rye infected with ergot caused illness and hallucinations. Nothing spices up village life like toxic bread, causing strange symptoms. And then there was hunger, harvest failure, drought, flood, war, pests, cold weather, transport breakdowns, taxation, bad policy. Hoarding any of these could turn a thin year into famine. Families reduced meals. Bread became smaller. Soup became symbolic. Livestock were sold or eaten. Seed grain was consumed despite future consequences. People survived on roots, weeds, bark flour, or whatever could be found. Modern grocery aisles would appear to many ancestors as supernatural abundance. Now let us stroll toward meat, the highly discussed but less regularly visited guest at the common table. Peasants did eat meat sometimes, depending on region and means. Pork was common where pigs were raised. Chickens gave eggs more regularly than bodies. Fish mattered near rivers or coasts. Hunting rights were often restricted, meaning forests full of animals might legally belong to someone wearing velvet. Imagine starving beside deer who were forbidden to touch. Salted meat could preserve protein, but salt cost money. Smoked meat helped if storage conditions cooperated. Spoilage remained a constant enemy. A nose test often replaced laboratory science. Cheese was valuable, butter too. Milk spoiled quickly, so transforming it into durable forms mattered. Fermentation was one of humanity's greatest quiet achievements. Let us now gently enter the subject of water. Fresh, clean water was not always easy to secure. Wells could be contaminated. Streams served many purposes, some noble, some deeply unhelpful. Animals drank there, laundry happened there. Waste sometimes found its way there, so beverages like ale, beer, small beer, cider, and wine diluted with water were common. Fermentation could make liquids safer than raw water. Yes, many people were partially hydrated by alcohol of modest strength. Civilization takes interesting routes. Now we float into hygiene. Contrary to lazy myths, people in the past did care about cleanliness. They disliked bad smells, grime, parasites, and discomfort just as you do. The issue was not indifference. It was infrastructure. Bathing required water, fuel, privacy, time, and facilities. Where bathhouses existed, Roman cities, Islamic cities, some medieval towns, later urban centers, people used them. Public baths could be social hubs, practical services, and occasionally scenes of scandal, because humans remain consistent. In places without bathhouses, washing happened with basins, cloths, tubs, rivers, heated buckets, or partial sponge methods. Full hot baths every evening in a private tiled room, rare luxury. Hands and faces were commonly washed more than popular stereotypes suggest. Linen undergarments absorbed sweat and could be changed or laundered. Clothing hygiene often mattered, because washing the body constantly was harder than washing fabric. A clever workaround, honestly. Soap existed in various forms, made from fats and ashes or other mixtures. Quality varied. Some cleaned well, some probably felt like an argument with your skin. Teeth were another matter. No modern toothpaste, no fluoride, no neat dental appointments with mildly terrifying chairs. People used cloths, twigs, powders, salt, herbs, charcoal mixtures, or simply did less than ideal maintenance. Tooth decay, gum disease, abscesses, and tooth loss were common. and yet some populations had better teeth than later sugar-heavy societies. Refined sugar would eventually enter history like a charming villain. Now let us discuss smell carefully. Historical towns smelled stronger than modern sanitized cities. Animals lived nearby. Waste disposal systems were inconsistent. Tanning, butchering, brewing, dyeing, and industry all produced aromas. Open drains existed. Chamber pots existed. Streets sometimes receive their contents with alarming directness. The cry of warning before tossing waste from a window was useful, though perhaps not fully reassuring. Perfumes, herbs, rushes on floors, incense, flowers, and scented pomanders were used to fight odors. This was less luxury fragrance culture, and more please let the room become survivable. Insects also joined the story. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, flies, mites, bedding stuffed with straw or feathers could host tiny tenants. Animals indoors added warmth and ecological complexity. Combing hair with fine combs was practical. Delousing each other was common in many societies. Romance looked different then. Let us drift into noble hygiene, because money helps, but never solves everything. Kings and queens had servants, linens, perfumes, elaborate garments, and access to baths or heated water more often than peasants. Yet palaces could still be drafty, crowded, and surprisingly messy. Large households generated waste. Plumbing lagged behind ambition. Courtiers packed into rooms carrying silk, gossip, and germs. A royal bedchamber might smell of wax, perfume, wool, damp stone, and to many people, some monarchs bathed regularly. Others avoided it due to medical fashion or superstition. Early modern Europe periodically developed anxieties about bathing, opening pores to disease. Nothing says progress like fearing soap. Louis XIV of France famously used enormous quantities of perfume in a court world where scent management was strategic warfare. Versailles glittered magnificently and also had sanitation issues that chandeliers could not fully solve. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Ottoman hammams, Japanese bathing culture, and many other traditions maintained richer bathing customs. History is not one single hygiene story. It is many local stories, some cleaner than others. Women's hygiene involved additional labor, rarely glamorized by chronicles written by men obsessed with tournaments. Menstruation management relied on cloths, absorbent materials, seclusion customs in some cultures, and practical knowledge passed quietly through generations. Childcare meant endless cleaning, without disposable anything. Laundry alone was heroic labor. Water hauled, clothes soaked, scrubbed with soap or lye. Beaten, wrung, rinsed, dried, mended, repeat forever. If a modern washing machine appeared in the 14th century, people might build a shrine around it. Now let us speak softly of disease. Poor sanitation, crowding, malnutrition, contaminated water, parasites, and limited medical knowledge meant infections spread easily. Diarrheal disease was deadly. Skin infections common. Epidemics catastrophic. Yet people also developed resilience, practical habits, quarantine methods, herbal treatments, and community care. They were not helpless fools stumbling through filth. They were adaptive humans facing hard conditions. That distinction matters, and through it all, meals were still cooked, bread still baked, clothes still scrubbed, babies still bathed in basins, gardens still planted. Ordinary life continued beneath the smell. So as we settle near the end of tonight's first stretch, Picture an evening in a medieval cottage, the stew pot scraped nearly empty, hands washed in a shared basin, smoke drifting upward lazily, boots by the door, wet clothes near the fire, a dog asleep under the bench, someone checking the bread for tomorrow. Outside, mud, inside, effort. In the next part, we'll drift further into royal bathrooms, medieval beauty standards, bizarre medical cleanliness advice, and the glamorous history of chamber pots, because history, as always, refuses to stay elegant. For now, rest easy. Your water likely runs clear. Your soap smells intentional. Hey guys, tonight we begin in a place humanity spent a surprising amount of time creating, the punishment square, a public space where officials gathered, crowds assembled, rules were announced, and someone somewhere deeply regretted recent decisions. We like to imagine the past as castles, music, and candlelight, but much of daily authority looks more like paperwork followed by embarrassment. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and relax into the strange history of harsh punishments. We are not here for gore or shouting. We are here for the slow, oddly bureaucratic ways societies try to keep order, frighten people, and occasionally make examples out of very unlucky bakers. As always, we move gently. No dramatic violence, just the sleepy truth that for centuries, justice often meant humiliation, pain, fines, exile, or standing in wood while neighbors judged your pasture. Take a breath. Let us wander into the old town square. The first thing to understand is that punishments in the past were often public, very public. Modern systems hide much of discipline behind walls, forms, and institutions. Older societies liked spectacle. If someone stole a chicken, insulted a magistrate, sold watered wine, or punched the wrong cousin, the community might be invited to observe consequences, because apparently social order required an audience. Public punishment served several goals at once. It penalized the offender, it warned others, it displayed the power of rulers, it entertained people who had already finished their chores, and entertainment options were limited. One of the most common punishments was the fine. This sounds mild, until you remember many people lived near subsistence. A fine could hurt deeply. Lose money, lose seed grain, lose tools, lose winter security. A nobleman paid a fine and sighed. A peasant paid a fine and reconsidered the universe. Then there was the pillory. The pillory was a wooden framework with holes for a head and hands. The offender stood locked in place, usually in public view, unable to leave and unable to defend dignity. Crowds might jeer, mock, throw rotten produce, or offer commentary no one requested. It was punishment by inconvenience and community sarcasm. Its close cousin, the stocks, restrained the feet and sometimes hands. Same general principle. Less mobility, more humiliation. Imagine being immobilized in the square while your neighbor uses the opportunity to discuss every annoying thing you've done since 1312. Some punishments focus specifically on shame. A person caught cheating weights in the market might be paraded around town. Drunkards could be displayed. Scolds, gossips, or those accused of constant quarrels sometimes faced devices designed to silence or ridicule. Yes, some authorities looked at annoying behavior and said, "We should invent furniture for this." In parts of Europe and colonial societies, the ducking stool punished women accused of scolding, disorderly conduct, or nuisance behavior. The accused might be strapped to a chair and dipped in water. Because patriarchy is rarely elegant, Moral offences also drew penalties: adultery, fornication, blasphemy, gambling, working on forbidden holy days, or dressing above one's station could invite sanctions, depending on time and place. Imagine being fined because your sleeves look too ambitious. Sumptuary laws regulated clothing in some societies. Silk for this class, fur for that class, gold trim for those people only. The state occasionally devoted real energy to stopping citizens from looking too fancy. Meanwhile, roads were terrible. Now let us glide into labor punishments. Forced labor was common. Road work, fortification building, rowing galleys, mining, cleaning public spaces, service to the crown. If rulers needed hard, unpleasant tasks done, convicted people became a labor pool. This was efficient in the cold administrative sense. It was also brutal. Galleys in particular were feared. Men chained to oars, long hours, exhausting rhythm, poor conditions, little freedom. The sea sparkled beautifully outside, which must have felt insulting. Imprisonment existed, but not always as the main punishment we think of today. Jails often held people awaiting trial, debt payment, ransom, or transfer. Long-term incarceration was expensive. Feeding prisoners costs money, and historical governments loved avoiding expenses when cruelty was cheaper. So punishments tended to be swift, visible, and practical. Whipping was common across many eras and cultures. Painful, public, relatively low cost, and instantly understandable to authorities with limited imagination. Branding was another method, a mark burned into skin to identify thieves, deserters, or repeat offenders. Nothing says rehabilitation like permanent labeling. Exile could be devastating. To be banished from a town or region meant losing family networks, land rights, customers, familiar language patterns, and survival systems. A merchant might rebuild elsewhere. A peasant might simply vanish into hardship. Social death often mattered more than physical pain. Let us float over to debt, one of history's favorite traps. Debtors' prisons existed in many times and places. Owe money, lose freedom, somehow still owe money. A concept so circular it almost becomes art. Families sometimes supported imprisoned debtors from outside. Without help, conditions could be grim. All because someone borrowed in the bad year, lost cargo in a storm, or trusted the wrong business partner, wearing too much confidence. Now we enter royal punishments, where power becomes personal. Kings and queens punished rivals differently from ordinary offenders. Nobles might receive imprisonment in castles rather than dungeons, exile with servants, or execution methods considered more honorable, because class distinctions apparently continued right to the end. A peasant thief might lose a hand in some legal systems. A duke who betrayed the crown might receive ceremony. Even punishment had seating arrangements. Some rulers were notoriously severe. Ivan IV of Russia, remembered as Ivan the Terrible, cultivated fear with theatrical intensity. Henry VIII of England punished enemies, wives, ministers, and former favourites with unnerving regularity. Once in favour, then not in favour, then suddenly discussing legal outcomes. Court life could feel like smiling on a thin layer of ice. Yet even milder monarchs used harsh penalties because states relied on deterrence. Limited police forces meant reputation mattered. If people feared punishment, authorities hoped they would obey. This often overestimated human foresight. Petty theft remained common. Smuggling flourished. Tax evasion became practically cultural in some regions. Black markets thrived whenever official rules became absurd, which was frequent. Let us drift toward military discipline. Armies historically punished desertion, mutiny, sleeping on watch, theft from comrades, cowardice, and disobedience severely. Why? Because armed groups collapse quickly when rules evaporate. Roman armies used flogging and even decimation, in extreme cases killing 1 in 10 of disgraced units by lot. A management style unlikely to win modern leadership awards. Early modern navies used lashes, irons, ration cuts, or kill-related threats that no one enjoyed. Life at sea was already miserable. Authorities still found room to innovate downward. Religious courts also imposed punishments. Penance, fines, pilgrimages, public confession, fasting, wearing identifying garments, or exclusion from sacraments. Social pressure in deeply religious societies carried immense weight. To be shunned by the community could be crushing. Now let us discuss children. Yes, children were punished harshly too. Homes, schools, apprenticeships, monasteries, workshops all could involve corporal discipline. Spare the rod philosophies endured for centuries because many adults confused fear with education. Some teachers appear to have considered terror a teaching aid. Men often faced punishments shaped by gender expectations. Sexual reputation was policed heavily. Domestic disorder blamed on wives more than husbands. Widows could be vulnerable. Accusations of witchcraft in certain periods targeted many women, especially the marginal, poor, elderly, or inconvenient. When societies feel anxious, they often punish the powerless first. Colonial regimes imposed harsh penalties on subject peoples. Enslaved populations endured systems of violence disguised as law. Indigenous communities were punished for resisting occupation, maintaining customs, or simply existing in the path of empire. Power loves procedure, yet not every historical legal system was purely savage chaos. Some had appeals, mediation, compensation systems, community arbitration, restorative payments, sanctuary rights, or customary protections. Many communities preferred settlement over brutality when possible, because endless punishment is exhausting to administer. Village courts often focused on practical peace. Return the pig, repair the fence, pay for damages. Swear publicly to stop shouting at dawn. Honestly, reasonable goals. Still, the threat of harsher measures lingered. Gallows on a hill, pillory in the square, prison tower visible from market stalls. Symbols mattered. They reminded everyone that authority was watching, or wished to appear so, and yet people adapted. They joked about officials, helped neighbors evade taxes, smuggled goods under hay, warned friends of inspections, hid fugitives, bribed clerks, used technicalities, married quickly when caught improperly affectionate. Ordinary people have always been creative under pressure. That may be one of history's warmest constants. So picture an old market town at dusk, stalls closing, mud underfoot, church bells sounding. A man released from the stocks rubbing sore ankles. Children already turning the day's punishment into exaggerated storytelling. Officials walking home feeling stern. Tomorrow another dispute would come. A stolen loaf. A boundary argument. Someone insulting someone else's goose. Civilization rolls forward on such matters. In the next part, we'll drift deeper into bizarre laws, strange medieval crimes, royal tantrums disguised as justice, and the long history of punishing people for being inconvenient, because governments, then as now, can be strangely sensitive. For now, rest easy. Your hands are free. No magistrate is inspecting your sleeve length.